Hello, beautiful people. Welcome once again to our weekly edition of Politics Analysis. But as usual, before I proceed, this is the best time for you to pause the video, go subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, give the video a thumbs up, which helps to share the video to more people, activate your notification bell to get notified of any of our new videos. Thank you. Now,
in the lead up to the 2023 general elections, Nigerian citizens demonstrated a clear commitment to the democratic process. That said, the election exposed enduring systemic weaknesses and therefore signal a need for further legal and operational reforms to enhance transparency, inclusiveness, and accountability. While we consider the electoral legal framework provides an adequate foundation for the conduct of democratic elections, there are ambiguities in the law. For example, the Electoral Act 2022, which had its first test in a general election in 2023, and other legal instruments evidenced gaps in terms of transparency, accountability, and inclusivity, and left room for uncertain implementation. For that reason, we recommend, and this is our first priority recommendation, to protect the interests of voters through certainty of law for all, which had its first test in a general election in 2023, and other legal instruments evidenced gaps in terms of transparency, accountability, and inclusivity, and left room for uncertain implementation. For that reason, we recommend, and this is our first priority recommendation, to protect the interests of voters through certainty of law for all stages and aspects of electoral processes by eliminating from electoral law and regulations errors and ambiguities to avoid potential for confusing interpretations and ensuring the revision processes are inclusive. A positive aspect of the voter registration process was active youth engagement, with 2/3 of the 9.5 million new registrants being young people. However, there is a need for greater efforts to protect genuine youth participation in elections, and similarly, ongoing underrepresentation of marginalized groups in political life requires robust remedial action. Overall, the collection of permanent voter cards was adversely affected by poor institutional planning and a lack of transparency. To ensure the accuracy and inclusiveness of the voter register, an external independent audit would be beneficial. The campaign was competitive, with freedom of assembly largely respected, as evidenced by the nationwide conduct of rallies. However, challenges such as the naira, cash, and fuel scarcity and incidents of orchestrated violence were observed to hamper some campaign activities and to reduce attendance. In addition, the mission recorded cases of undue interference by governors, while the campaign was also marred by internal party conflicts. Personality-focused canvassing and misuses of incumbency by governors tilted the playing field, leading to increased polarization, driven by divisive rhetoric based on ethnicity and religion. Candidates' prospects to meaningfully campaign also were negatively impacted by a high level of disputes resulting from candidate registration. The mission noted well over 1,000 pre-election court cases, some negatively impacted or overlapped with the polls. Our mission recorded more than 100 campaign-related violent incidents, including, tragically, assassinations. These and other criminal acts obstructed the campaign, disrupted the elections, and suppressed voter participation. Weaknesses in the legal framework for these electoral offences and others, such as misuse of state resources, intimidation, and vote buying, contributed to inadequate enforcement. Key state institutions, including Inec, but also political parties, failed to tackle these problems. Coming to our second priority recommendation, we consider there is a pressing need to address impunity for electoral offences, through robust, well-defined and effective interagency coordination governed by clear rules on non-partisanship, optimization of resources, delivery of effective investigation and sanctioning, and provision of regular public consolidated information on outcomes. Inec introduced some very positive measures early in the electoral process. For example, it increased the number of polling units and established a system of electronic accreditation of party agents, media and observers. Public confidence, however, in Inec was severely damaged on the 25th of February due to its operational failures and lack of transparency. While some corrective measures introduced before the 18th of March elections seemed to have a positive impact, overall trust was not restored and eventually led civil society to call for an independent audit of the entire process. However, there is no legal requirement for qualification and merit-based appointments of the positions of Inec Commissioner or Resident Electoral Commissioner. Prior to the elections, selection processes were questioned, leaving the institution vulnerable to mistrust. We believe that these vulnerabilities can be effectively addressed by, and this is our third priority recommendation, establishing a robust operational framework for the independence, integrity and efficiency of electoral administration through an inclusive and publicly accountable mechanism for selecting candidates to the posts of Inec commissioners and recs based on clear criteria of evaluation of merits, qualifications and verified non-partisanship. A number of key issues hindered freedom of expression and limited voters' access to diverse information. For example, analytical reporting was limited due to self-censorship by state-level outlets who feared retribution from governors. Fines were imposed by the broadcast media regulator without due process. We are also seriously concerned journalists faced attacks and with little consequences for the perpetrators. Therefore, and our fourth priority recommendation, we consider it essential to afford adequate protection to freedom of expression by developing a comprehensive operational framework underpinned by the skills and means for ensuring prompt investigation and prosecution of all types of attacks against media practitioners. Positively, the media raised voters' awareness, fact-checkers stood up against disinformation, and media outlets extensively covered the campaign, providing equitable exposure to both the APC and PDP. Disappointingly, politicians avoided answering merit-based questions during interviews and instead engaged in party infighting. While social media was an important tool for information exchange, campaigning and mobilization, misinformation was massively spread. Additionally, we noted legal provisions such as the Cybercrime Act had the effect of encouraging self-censorship, and we therefore consider amendment of the legislation is needed to safeguard freedom of expression. Detailed operational frameworks to strengthen inclusion are needed. For example, we found that persons with disabilities could not always access polling units and assistive devices were rarely available. Data on registration and voting by internally displaced persons was not published. Women's political participation in Nigeria is not in line with the country's international commitments and provision of equality. The number of women participating in the process evidences a worrisome trend of decline since 2007. Only one woman contested among 18 presidential candidates, and there were no nominated female running mates. So while the 25th February elections were held on schedule, a lack of transparency and operational failures reduced trust in the process and challenged the right to vote. Voters assigned to new polling units had difficulties in identifying their correct polling unit, and the conditions in almost half of polling units observed did not ensure the secrecy of the vote. In 16 states, the mission noted incidents of violent attacks on polling units and indeed on Inec staff and harassment of voters. The counting procedures were negatively impacted by overall poor understanding particularly in completing forms, and chaotic and overcrowded conditions in collation centres observed. Key issues impacting the orderly conduct of elections on March the 18th included interference by party agents and a lack of adequate protection of the secrecy of the vote. The elections were impacted by outbreaks of fighting and thuggery, which led to a high number of cancellations of polling units and, regrettably, also fatalities. The introduction of the bimodal voter accreditation system, or BVAS, and the Inec results viewing portal IREV was widely seen as an important step to ensure the integrity and credibility of the elections, but lack of transparency before the polls, and notably the severely delayed display of presidential result forms on the 25th of February, for which Inec failed to give a timely and comprehensive explanation, dashed the public trust in election technologies and in Inec. For both elections, Inec did not publish key relevant information, hampering transparency throughout the collation processes and the declaration of election results. For example, Inec failed to publish the manner of calculation of the declared winners, turnouts, number of accredited voters, and the list of polling units where elections were cancelled, postponed, or not held. The absence of this information undermined the possibility for independent verification of the outcome and public trust. We consider it vital, and this is our final priority recommendation, to protect the free expression of the will of the voter and integrity of elections by establishing a robust, transparent, and easily verifiable results processing system with clear rules. These include uploading polling unit results from the polling unit only and in real time. At each level of collation, results forms to be uploaded in real time, and all forms to be published in an easily trackable and scrapable database format.
Culture in Nigeria vis-a-vis the Nigerian politician, what kind of mark will you give them? Are we improving or we are stagnant? Thank you.
If only it was as simple as giving a mark to all of the stakeholders and how it's running. It is, of course, I completely understand your motivation to ask the question, and we have been, we've engaged very much with Inec. Doors have been open to speak with us throughout the process from the very beginning, including yesterday. And I emphasize that we really hope that such criticisms are here, and they are robust criticisms, are taken in the spirit in which they're given. And the spirit in which they're given is one of constructive criticism towards a shared goal towards deepening Nigeria's democracy. We judge elections on the basis of international criteria around inclusivity, credibility, transparency, and accountability. And throughout the report, we draw on these central principles. And it is for the people of Nigeria to conclude, based on what we found, to make the mark, I would say. I think you have a general question about the direction of travel of Nigerian democracy. And I think I made this point before when we launched our preliminary statement. And, there is sort of democratic backsliding across the world. In Europe, we are facing severe rule of law challenges from individual member states. Former EU country, UK, they're having problems. It has to be said. The United States had an incredibly complex election, to put it mildly, in 2020. So, this isn't unique to Nigeria, to West Africa, to Africa. It is an issue that, in my view, therefore underlines the need for further election monitoring. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a reciprocal process. It's of mutual benefit to both our democracies, and it deepens the relations more generally outside of the framework of elections. So I think that we as a mission don't compare one election to the next, because we were only here for the period of January to April. And I certainly wasn't here for the last election, so it would be outside of our normal procedure to try to compare. So I hope that answers your question as closely as I can. You know, there isn't a threshold where we say, well, I'm afraid this election has been so poor that we have no further interest in democratic governance or rule of law in Nigeria. And I think that would be a dangerous thing. And I've outlined my concerns generally that we are in a period of democratic recession across the world. Just 6% of people in the world live in free countries, according to the Democracy Index published by Freedom House. So the time for investing in election monitoring is even more profound and more urgent, in my opinion. In any case, the question of investing in democratic governance here in Nigeria is a matter for the EU delegation. And it's really important to remind you that this mission is separate from the delegation, which allows the delegation to be able to have their diplomatic relations with the government separate from the work that we carry out during the course of this mission. The process of the election itself is one component of the work that we carry out as a mission. We looked at all of the processes up to election day and subsequently. Election day itself, there were obvious shortcomings, and I've outlined them in the speech, and they're contained in the final report and feed into the recommendations. So, for example, I mentioned the fact that there was a lack of transparency around data in relation to the collection of PVCs. There should have been better distribution of sensitive materials and earlier distribution of sensitive materials. We should have had absolute real-time uploading of results, particularly the presidential results on the day of the election. And these shortcomings are laid out here. And it's not as if we are coming with any new standard. These are the standards that Nigeria has set for itself. So we bring these to light. It is for Nigerians themselves and all stakeholders in Nigeria to determine what their view is about their democratic institutions, about their political parties, about all the stakeholders that are taking part in elections here in Nigeria. We carry this out at your invitation, with your permission, and if you want to take that forward, we finish our work this Friday, and we hope that it has been some contribution to help the discussion and period of national reflection after the elections.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Politics Analysis. Hope you did enjoy the video. Once more, kindly subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also activate your notification bell to get notified of our new videos. Also, if you have a suggestion of videos that you'd like us to talk about and analyze, feel free to make your suggestion on the comment section and we could take your advice. Thanks for watching. Until the next edition, from me, from here, it's goodbye.